Hello everyone, it's the Wandering Hermit here, back again. It's been a very, very long time since I uploaded my last video. There's, not enough time to explain all the stuff that's been going on, both in work and in personal life, so I'll just skip over that. But needless to say, it's been an interesting few months. Had not much time to think, but when I have been thinking, it's taken me on a pretty tumultuous road, really, resulting in some major changes in perspective, and it's helped me understand a lot of things, particularly where I am on my spiritual path in general. And I think it's, the sort of situation that I've been through lately is something that I think a lot of people can relate to. You reach a certain point in your spiritual practice where you feel as though you're not making any progress. You feel as though you've stagnated, that you're doing all the reading that you can think of. You're trying to put the theoretical concepts that you hear about and read about, you're trying to put those into practice, and you're not really getting anything out of it, and you're wondering what you're missing. And then something really unexpected happens, something that kind of shocks you or shakes you up and turns your whole world upside down. And then suddenly you're forced to reevaluate everything that you think you believe, everything that you think you know. And then at that point you realise what it was that you were lacking on your journey, and it sort of makes everything fall into place, and it puts you on a whole new direction. And that's kind of happened to me recently. I've been thrust onto what many regard quite generally as the shamanic path. Now, I hesitate to use the word shamanic because it's a very loaded word, and I'll explain briefly why. As many of you will know, the word shaman comes from the old Siberian word for one who knows, or wise one, or one who sees. And to regard oneself as a shaman specifically is to take on a specific set of cultural attributes, as it were. Now, people mistakenly refer to indigenous Amazonian practice as shamanism. They refer to indigenous African practice as shamanism. Aboriginal practice they regard as shamanism. Native American practice, again, is thrown in with shamanism. And this causes a lot of debate. But I think, just as pagan is a very loaded word, but has now been used as an umbrella term, I think shaman is very similar. I think shamanism, to me, it can rightly be used to generally describe the tribal practices of indigenous peoples all around the world, because when you start looking at shamanic practice and then compare it to other indigenous practices around the world, you see there are striking commonalities between all of them. First and foremost is just the focus on nature as a source of infinite wisdom. The second is connection to spirits, particularly ancestral spirits. Many indigenous cultures also have the idea of animal spirits that we can connect to and work with. Plant spirits as well, particularly in the Amazon. You've got so many millions of different subspecies of plants, it's not surprising that they focus a lot on plant spirits. So it's this idea that we as a species can intuitively understand and consciously connect with the natural world and kind of exchange with the spirits thereof, the spirits of our own species, our ancestors, the spirits of the plants and the animals and the rocks and the rivers. And in so doing, we can heal ourselves and learn to heal others. That to me is the essence of shamanic practice. And a lot of people may disagree with that. That's perfectly fine. But from my experience and my research and talking to a lot of people about these various matters, that is what I regard myself as now, is a shamanic practitioner, not necessarily a shaman, because I'm not of, the Sami, I'm not of the Tungusk. I can't assume that cultural identity as shaman or shaman, or however you want to pronounce it. But I would say that I am one who practices shamanic technique to an extent, or I incorporate that into my spiritual practice. So now we've got that cleared up. I want to talk a bit about not just the shift in perspective that's put me onto the shamanic path, but a major theme that shows up in shamanic work, shamanic practice, which is spirit sickness. And in a way, I think part of that is what's put me onto this path in the first place. So the two are linked. So bear with me. My family's been going through a hard time the last 2 months or so. And I won't go into the details of it until it's all blown over, and then I can talk about it openly without jinxing anything. So, but it kind of makes you value life itself more, and it makes you value your own perspective on life more. It puts you in a position where you're forced to genuinely believe that the universe has your back. I mean, a lot of people say, yeah, and I agree with people who say the universe doesn't have your back. The universe owes you nothing. You can't just expect the universe to help you out. It doesn't work that way. And yeah, I agree with them. But at the same time, I am forced to believe that what I focus on and envision and direct my will and intention to, I have to believe that that is actually going to manifest physically, and that whatever forces that I'm working with, whatever energy that I'm working with in the universe, be it deity, be it my own consciousness, be it the universe as, an organic organism, whatever it is, whatever you guys believe it is, because to me all outlooks are valid. But whatever it is I'm working with, I have to believe that it hears me and will respond in a way that kind of benefits and answers my prayers, if you want to call them prayers. Not really prayers, but helps me to manifest that which I envision. Because if I don't believe it, then in my own model of thinking, then what I hope for isn't going to happen. And that's the worst thing that I can possibly imagine at the moment. So it's as if when I get to that point where I start to question my own worldview and question my beliefs and everything else, the forces, the powers that be, kind of turn around and slap me over the back of the head and say, well, if you need proof, then stay the course through this storm, and if you come out the other side, that is your proof. In a way, it's like, Christians having faith in God to like heal their illnesses or whatever. It's the same principle. I am actually having to go on faith here that my efforts are going to pay off, and I believe they will. So how does that tie in with spirit sickness? First, I have to talk about what spirit sickness is. And to do that, you have to get a fundamental grasp of how the spiritual dimension interacts with the physical world, the divine and the mundane, how they interact. Now, I've talked about this in previous videos, so I'm not going to dwell on it too long. But the whole idea that in one of my previous videos, I said that it could be that a fire exists before a fire exists. Because, as we know, fire started by a process of molecules being battered against each other and vibrating higher to emit light and heat. But what causes them to do that? there has to be an essence of the fire to start the physical process that creates fire. So the fire exists in spirit before it exists physically. Now that's really, when you put it that way, it's a basic concept. It's all part of a physical process. I'm not going to call it a metaphysical process, but it is part of the world we live in. We don't understand it fully yet, but there it is. So in that same vein of thinking, if something can happen in essence before it happens in physical reality, then the same thing applies to the body. So, all of us aren't just our physical selves. We are non-physical entities in a physical body, and our non-physical selves can act externally and independently from our physical selves. Many of us conflate this with the idea of having a guardian angel. Others conflate it with the idea of God. In my personal belief, my non-physical self is the God of my individual universe. So, that's the way I see it. Other people disagree. Again, I think we're going to disagree on a lot. But in that sense, anything that happens to my physical body can in turn affect my non-physical body, and vice versa. So something that happens to my non-physical body then manifests physically. I think that the circumstances that I've been put into lately have put my physical body under a lot of stress. This stress obviously manifests physiologically. You come out in hives, you get palpitations, you struggle breathing, you get whiteouts, you lose time, that sort of thing. Fatigue, those are all those physiological manifestations of stress, which is technically a psychological thing. But then I think that also translates in the opposite direction towards the spiritual. And when the spiritual body or the light body is interfered with, it creates all kinds of problems. It kind of has a ripple effect because our non-physical selves aren't separate from the world at large. They are an integral part of the energetic field of the world. So when my non-physical self is out of balance, that ripples out into my physical world around me as well. It manifests as things going wrong. It manifests as a stagnation or a turbulence in other cases in my physical surroundings. And that flux of energy kind of acts as a magnet for other forces or the consciousnesses or whatever that benefit from that discord and that disharmony. They feed on it, and it creates a spirit sickness. They can be parasites, or it can just be an imbalance in the spiritual body. So noticing that in myself and taking steps to correct it has really made me realize that the shamanic path is the closest thing that I can get to the primordial tradition, and it's the closest thing that I can get to a practice that translates into the physical world in a way that I can see and feel and demonstrate to other people. And that's really what I'm working on developing at the moment, is my shamanic skills. So I've been doing a lot of meditation, I've been doing a lot of journeying, a lot of journaling, drum journeys and things like that, working with plants, working with animal symbolism, starting to work with the ancestors a lot more closely. And I am noticing a difference. So that's really what's thrown me onto the path. Now, talking about spirit sickness, out of the context of my own experience, but just in general, people go through things in their everyday lives, all the time, and it attracts parasitic energy, and it can throw their own energy out of balance, and then that manifests physically. So it could be that stress causes the spiritual imbalance, or it can be vice versa. If the spirit is out of balance, then that can manifest physically. The best way to, well, I'll say the best way to remedy this, one of the many ways of remedying this that I've noticed is to kind of feel the energetic body. And you have to kind of tune in to the energetic body in the same way that Reiki healers do, in the same way that psychic surgeons do. Psychic surgery really is pretty much a shamanic practice. You have to intuitively feel what is out of whack in a person's energetic field and what's out of whack with their spirit. You ask them a series of questions, and you can gauge what could be the problem by what they say in response. But once you kind of have a vague idea of what could be wrong, the trick then is to try to visualize it and to try to see it in your mind's eye. You see without seeing. You close your eyes and you visualize in your mind what the problem could be and where it's located. Now, this can manifest as an absence of something. So you could say one of the energetic centers of the body is underactive, and that would manifest in your visual sense as a hole, an absence that needs to be filled, or a machine that needs to be powered up. And then, say for example, it is a hole. To correct that, you would visualize taking energy from either yourself, which is not really advisable because you're then draining your own energy for somebody else's benefit. It's not good. It's better to take it from an external source, either from nature or from, if you work with crystals, you can store energy in crystals and use those. You take the necessary energy, the corresponding energy that is required, and you fill the hole in. You can visualize kind of digging that energy with a spade and shoveling it into the hole and patting it down and filling that hole up and making it nice and level, as if there was never anything missing. Or if there is a clog in an energy center, if there's too much going on, if there's something obstructing a person's spiritual and physical and mental and emotional processes, you might visualize this as like sticky tar or gravel. One of the occasions that I've had an energetic blockage, it's been a pile of broken glass. And the trick is then to clear it up as you would clear up that physical mess. So broken glass, you sweep it all into a spectral dustpan and brush, and you tip it into a bin. You imagine like a black hole opening up next to you, and you shovel all of that broken glass or all of that gravel into that hole, and it's swallowed up into the void and returned to the world, where it can be recycled and turned into something better. Then there's the issue of spirit invasion, if you want to call it that, or parasitic energy. This can manifest as an animal or as some kind of abstract being anyway, attached to the person. If you can visualize what it is, then the next step is to figure out how it behaves. And usually the way it presents itself to you visually in your mind is an indication as to how to approach it. So a healing I did not long ago, there was a woman who had baggage from her past anyway, and it manifested because it decided to take on a life of its own and drain her for its own purposes. It manifested as a coiled serpent, a poisonous one at that, a viper. So I couldn't just reach in and grab it because it's going to fight back, and it could injure me spiritually, which could then manifest physically. So you could say it's going to do me harm. So I had to imagine a way that I could approach it safely without hurting myself and without causing too much unnecessary trauma to the patient or the subject, as it were. So how else do you wrangle a snake? You imagine a stick with a slit knot on the end. You can conjure this up in your mind's eye and imagine that you're holding it in your spirit hand, and you kind of reach in and you snag the snake, and then you can begin to slowly pull it out. Now you can't just yank it out, because if it's embedded, if it's coiled around in there, then it could be that you cause damage to that person's energetic field, which then is, creates more work for you. So the trick was to slowly pull it out and let it unwind naturally with as little resistance as possible, until it was all out and I could see in my mind's eye that it was removed, and I could feel intuitively that it was removed. And usually the subject elicits a physical response to the energy being removed. There's a noticeable relaxation of the body. When I saw this and felt this, I knew that the job was done. So I put the snake into the black hole that I'd imagined, and it was swallowed up, and the black hole closed over, and that was it. It was done. Then, of course, it's a case of analysing the space that's left. If it's a space that needs to be filled, again, as I said before, fill with the necessary energy. If not, it could just be that it's like an open wound, it needs to be stitched. Imagine you're physically stitching up a wound. That is the best way to direct your mind, your energy, through the filter of the mind, so that it acts in a very specific way. All this sounds like pretty kooky, but through practicing it on myself and on others, I'm saying that it does actually work. So once you've stitched the person up, so to speak, it's a case of going through like the meridian points and just checking them over in general, making sure that everything's as it should be. And then, whatever ritual that you're doing to do that, if you have an opening or closing stage to your practice, then you'd do that, and you'd cleanse and send them on the way. It just gets me thinking so much about people in general, and how society gears us to look for problems, not solutions. It gears us to look for threat, and it gears us towards competition and conflict. All of these have a negative effect on the human psyche, which then translates in both directions into physical ailment and spiritual imbalance. Now, if you heal one, it has a knock-on effect on the other. But sometimes it's easier to heal the spirit than it is to heal the body, and other times it's easier to heal the physical ailment than it is to heal the spirit. So again, it's knowing which direction you want to work. But it's just like, these are just the thoughts that I've been having pardon me, with regards to this particular aspect of shamanic practice, is the kind of the vision quest aspect of being able to heal another person or heal the self. You can do it with the self. It's harder to do it with the self because we lie to ourselves constantly. We're constantly like tricking ourselves out of the truth, because there are certain things that we don't want to believe about ourselves. So there are things that we overlook, there are things that we willfully ignore. There's always personal bias against the self. There's always self-criticism and whatnot, and that, often that gets in the way of self-healing. But healing somebody else, you can be more objective about it. But yeah, I found this kind of stage in my journey quite interesting, and I thought I'd share it with you guys just to see what you guys think. I'm approaching 25 minutes now, so I'm going to cut it off there. Please leave your comments below. Let me know what you think, if you've had any experience of shamanic healing from someone else, or if you've done it yourself, or if you're interested in shamanism, if you have any questions, if you have any just opinions in general, share them below. I'd be glad to hear what you think. I'm going to be doing more videos soon, so I will see you then. And until next time, thank you very much for watching, and may your gods be with you. Bye for now.